Language creates the illusion of separation, the illusion of duality. The one divided in 1,000 different ways through the illusion of language, mathematical language and verbal language, creates the idea of black and white as separate, as up and down as separate. But these are just words. These are mental constructs. You cannot have up without down. You cannot have white without black. And the one doesn't really exist in pieces. It's all part of an ecological whole that is being perceived through the lens of language, the lens of thought that rests on the foundation of language. So it makes sense that there is something evil in good and something good in evil. And so that's what we'll be exploring, is the evil within good and the good within evil. Let's start with good. If our childhood, if our world is too perfect, too idealistic, something we've never really had to worry about, there's no movement from the childlike innocence of sympathy as the infant, as the child downloads the family and cult code to become a clone. There's no reason to rebel and grow up psychologically into adolescence, the adolescence of antipathy, and thus set the stage for adulthood responsibility, the ability and willingness to iterate a better world. The entire maturation process depends on something being wrong in childhood. If we look at reality, we can see that our first relationship with reality in the revolution of childhood is of innocence, of sympathy, and of victimhood. The world, our parents, our siblings do things to us that are wrong, that are unfair, that are lacking in skill, that are suboptimal, that are painful. And the child endures. The child tries to make it work, which sets the stage for the adolescent revolution of antipathy, of rebellion, of criticism, of blame and judgment. That's wrong, that's hypocritical, that's unfair, right? That's painful, that's fucked up. If there was nothing fucked up in our childhood, there is no movement, there's no progression to articulation, to rebellion, to criticism, which serves as the foundation for iteration in the third evolution into adulthood. The adolescent blames and complains about the faults in the world and waits for someone else to fix it. The adult finally understands that there is no one else to fix it, that we must become a better version of cult code, of reality than the generation before. If we don't, the same flaws will be passed on unedited, unimproved. They will be just passed through a copy of what we were given. The adult, informed by the criticism of adolescence, takes the data from childhood and edits it, refines it, rewrites it, and passes the next version of imperfection to the subsequent generation. There is no evolution in perfection. There's no impetus. It takes work to rebel, and there's no impetus to rebel without pain. Eventually, the final revolution of transcendence, we transcend the sympathy and blind faith of the child into the cynicism, skepticism, and criticism of the adolescents, to the maturity of adulthood, the response, the willingness to step in there and make things better. If there is no pain, there is no trauma. If there is no helpless, small moment, there is no attachment. Right? The greatest attachment most of us have as human beings is to never feel that way again. We leave home, we get a divorce, we move out of town, we get rid of that abusive career, that abusive job, because we never want to feel that way again. The attachment to feel better, even deeper, the attachment to not feel helpless, to not feel out of control, to not feel pain, is the deepest loyalty, the deepest attachment that many of us have as human beings. I don't want to feel that way again. This attachment must be transcended on the journey to unconditional acceptance, to unconditional surrender. The journey to becoming the deity, the one that is beyond the self. The muscle, the task, the challenge of the deity is not to unconditionally love ice cream cones. That's not a big challenge. It's not to unconditionally love sex with a partner who's loyal and beautiful and attractive. That's not hard, right? To become a deity, to transcend language, to transcend the divide between the illusion of separation and all that is, we must face our greatest attachment, which is to avoiding our highest moment of pain. I saw that happen to that person, and I'm absolutely committed that that will never happen to me. That's an attachment that's incredibly strong. Right? And we don't need to let go of that attachment to become an adult. We can form an iterative relationship with all that is about avoiding this source of pain and that source of pain, and protecting our family and planning that we'll never feel this or that way again. We can do that as grown-up as adult individuals. But we cannot transcend. We cannot let go of our separation from all that is. We cannot become the deity until we face and release our attachment to the world of language. In other words, we cannot go through the doorway into the divine, into wholeness. We cannot heal the deepest wound of all until we face and let go of the greatest pain in our psyche, our heart, mind, and body, the greatest pain in our human history, the greatest pain in our family history, the greatest pain we have personally experienced, until we face and let go of that portion of the possibility field that we are absolutely committed to avoiding at all costs and are thus bound to through antipathy. We must face it and we must let it go. Facing that is the most challenging, the most difficult, the most painful thing that we can do and will do. And facing it provides the muscle. Right? You can think of it as lifting weights, and some things, they're 1 ounce? You can lift an ounce. You're not going to grow strong lifting ounces. How many ounces did you lift? I bench pressed 1 ounce. It's not going to do it, right? And one's never going to become a deity and transcend the world of duality by loving ice cream. Anyone can do that. You love ice cream? Oh, me too. I love ice cream, right? We'd all be deities. Right? A saint, a deity, whatever you want to call it, in that state of unconditional love and surrender that transcends the I. Right? As long as there's one thing that the I clings to more than anything else, I have to love this person. I can't ever have this thing be found out. I can't feel that way. I've got to avoid cold water at all costs. I have got to repel or hold on to this thing at all costs. And of course, what is it that we want to hold on to at all costs? We want to suppress, reject, and avoid the worst possible things. And we want to cling to the things that make us happy, that make us joyful, that make us feel safe, right? This feeling, this habit, this thing. I bought this thing and people like me now and I never want to let go of this thing. It's the things that we value the most, either to avoid or to possess or to experience. Those are the last things to face. But one cannot go through the doorway to freedom as long as there is one thing, one pain we're determined not to feel, not to be conscious of, one flaw we're determined not to see about ourselves, one lust, one attachment that I want more than I want to go through the doorway, right? And so it is the very smallest, coldest, loneliest, most painful moment of our life and of the possibility field of the species that is the hardest thing to tolerate, to be present for, and thus the hardest thing to love. And that is the key. To go through the doorway and let go of the divided delusion of I. That is the transcendent moment, the transcendent self. That is the future. That is the deity. And it is the most painful moment of our life that provides the muscle. It's the heaviest thing to lift. It's the heaviest thing to let go of. It is the hardest thing to face. And it prepares us for the strength required to be the transcendent self. Right. And it all begins with imperfection. It all begins with imperfection. If the world is too good, too perfect, too ideal, this entire revolutionary, evolutionary process is stillborn. The world is wonderful. The world is trustworthy. Everyone takes care of you, and you stay an innocent child. You don't need to think about those things. You know, a good parent, a good deity will take care of them. You don't have to grow. You don't have to plan for the future. It's already perfect right now. You don't have to say, how do I get out of this into that? Because it's already perfect. In other words, when things are too good, evolution and thus life stops, becomes stagnant. It's the end of growth, the end of life. When there's no pain, right? You can take certain drugs, for example, that eliminate all pain. There are certain children that are born with the inability to feel pain, and so they're fascinated with their own blood. You know, a 5-year-old child, never having once experienced pain, will walk into a glass shard and they'll watch themselves bleeding and they feel absolutely nothing and they just keep playing as they bleed to death. It's their parents that are horrified as their child is bleeding to death. The child isn't, because they feel no pain. In other words, when everything is positive, oh, maybe it's time to die, right? Then there's nothing to set us back on course, right? Pain and the fear of pain are the guides to go back on course, right? When the food is too good, right? The food is absolutely luxuriously rich, right? Chocolate cake, butter, asparagus, mashed potatoes, whatever it is, right? Oh, French fries, roasted this, ice cream. When the food is too good, we start getting sick. When the food is too rich, we start getting sick. When we eat too much, we get sick, right? When we have too much, if we have too much things, I want things, things are good. If we have too many things, now we're constantly attending, right? If we have 300 cars, the best cars in the world, well, what do we spend our time to? We have to attend to this car and then attend to that car, charge the battery on that car. You have to maintain 300 cars. It becomes a prison, right? In other words, too much of a good thing, too much water, too much sugar, too much sex, too much money, too much oxygen, too little oxygen, right? Too much of a good thing. If you take it to an extreme, it becomes toxic, right? So there is evil in good, right? A few thousand years ago, salt was a very precious commodity, and people were dying from a lack of salt. So salt was good. Salt was currency. Salt was life. But too much salt is killing us, right? So there is evil within good. When you're cold, a fire, warmth, right, is good. Too much warmth, bring the temperature up to 300 or 400 degrees. The thing that was good at a small level becomes toxic at a big level, and it kills us. But what about the other side? Why is there good in evil? And of course, it is language that divides the one into two, into polarity, and says that half of life, whenever you divide the one into two, you have two equal halves. So half of world is good, and half of the world is evil, right? So those are mental constructs. So we have to then divide the one. What does it mean? Like pain. Pain is evil. And we can say that delivering pain is cruelty, and cruelty is evil. And we can say that revenge is evil. We can say that death, murder, let's say murder is evil. What else? Stealing, rape, lies, the usual, right? These are evil things. Well, and so evil is evil, right? And evil is bad, and we've got to get rid of evil, right? Well, let's go through some of these things. Because just as there's evil in good, there may be good within evil. That would be symmetrical, right? So back to the children born without any pain receptors that happily play, get into accidents, knock each other's teeth out, knock their own. It's just fascinating. Oh, I hit my tooth with hammer. Now this is happening, right? I can bite my lip and create a hole here. It's so interesting, right? So you see that pain is good. Why is pain good? Number one, it alerts you that you're off track, right? The evolutionary track. Meaning, if you do things that dislocate your body, you can't reach your full potential as a human being. You can't become the next step forward in evolution. You can't take good care of your infant. So having a certain amount of integrity with your body is good. And pain is what guides you on that track. Right. If you had no pain reception, you were hammering and you just hammer your finger and, it turns blue after a while, big deal. Well, the problem is, it is a big deal, right? Your fingers are going to die earlier if you just keep hammering them that way. And the pain receptors tell you, take good care of your fingers. So the pain is good because it teaches you respect for the structures in life that are going to create the next stage of evolution. You think of emotional pain. You do something cruel, you lie, you don't do this, you don't respect a relationship and a good friend leaves and says, no, this is too painful. You're doing the wrong thing and you're hurting me over and over again. I'm leaving. Well, what do you learn from that? You learn respect. You're right. I probably should stop lying and stealing and doing these things, etc. So emotional pain can help us appreciate what we've lost, to value what we have, to learn respect for feelings, for other people. Right? And mental pain, what's that? It's I'm going crazy, I'm overwhelmed, right? Okay, so mental pain guides us to come back to symmetry, back to intelligence. You know, you keep saying that I'm your good friend, and then you do this and this and this and this that all have nothing to do with friendship and all have to do with expediency. It's painful thinking of you as a friend. You're a traitor. You're a liar. You're completely self-centered. You don't even know what the word means. It's painful to hear that word, right? So I'm not going to, no, we're not friends. This isn't friendship, by the way, right? This is narcissistic usury that you think you can use more effectively if you call it friendship, right? But it's not really fun, right? And so pain is the bell that's saying you're getting off track. You're treating your body poorly. You're treating your planet poorly, right? You get smog, you get respiratory pain. What if you started cutting down trees and you never felt bad as you lose oxygen? And then one day the last tree is cut and everyone's dead and you don't feel bad about that either. And so there's no warning that you're getting off track. So pain is good as a guide back on course. You know, I was eating this food and I feel really, really sick. So I stop eating that food and now I eat food that makes me feel healthy. I'm back on track. So pain is good. So what about stealing? We all know the bad side of stealing, right? But what about when stealing is good, right? You live in an oppressive regime that treats women as as possessions, punishes people for, punishes women for not asking permission from the master. So you decide to rebel against an unjust, corrupt system, right? And that now you're a criminal, you're a fugitive, right? When the United States rebelled against Britain's high taxes and the like, the United States became a criminal, a fugitive, and it stole things from the British in order to move towards a higher state of governance, a higher state of freedom, to move closer to beauty, truth, and goodness, right? Theft, right? Imagine you're Anne Frank in Hitler's Germany, and the only way you're going to stay alive is not by saying, hey, I'm a Jew, throw me in the gas chambers, is to steal something, to steal a loaf of bread, and thus keep alive so that something better is available, right? So stealing something, stealing power from those who would use it corruptly, stealing bread from people trying to kill you, right? Stealing is good sometimes, right? You're trying to get out of an abusive relationship. And if your partner has any sense, they will do everything they can to crush you, right? Because they want to abuse you, right? That's what they know how to do. They don't know how to do something else. They don't want to be alone. Right? So you have to steal something. Steal resources, steal truth, right? You look at rape, right? Throughout the history of humanity, right? Let's look at the Philippines. When the Japanese invaded the Philippines and conquered the Philippines, whether it's true or not, the story goes, so there's a high statistic associated that every Filipino woman was raped. Right? You say that's bad. That's bad. Well, obviously, but we're looking at the good that is linked to evil, right? That you can't have, much like the Chinese have a much more intelligent understanding of duality, right? That within every polarity, there's a little bit of the other, right? So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the good within evil. Well, my wife is Filipina. So there's a very high statistical likelihood that she is a descendant from rape. Now, there's also a high likelihood that in the last thousand iterations of our family lineage, that part of that lineage includes rape. And if you take 1,000 generations, right, some of the women, some of the time in those 1,000 generations, were raped, which means that some of our ancestors are rape children, children of rape. Now, as you go back deeper into more of the animal kingdom, the human animal, that period, well, if you look at monkeys or chimps, it's not a, do you mind if we have sex? Do you feel attracted to me? No, right? It's fight-flight dynamic, right? It's aggression, right? So in that sense, as we go back into the animal kingdom, you have quite a high statistic of rape, right? Where basically the male rooster chases the other one around and bites their neck and pins them down. Oh, they give up and whatever, and eggs are born, right? So you can say that rape is bad, but it is possible that none of us would be alive today if we deleted all rape in our entire lineage. Meaning that a rape every 3 generations, 10 generations, 100 generations actually creates, and there's also, you tend to have beauty, right? You have this, Filipinas are some of the most beautiful people in the world. Why? Well, the Spanish raped Filipinos. The Japanese raped Filipinos. The Chinese raped. And the Chinese, the Japanese, the Spanish mated. So as you get confluences of difference, you often get a whole, a synergy that is more beautiful, more complex than just one, right? So consent and healthy mating, etc., is part of that. And so is rape, right? So there's probably other threads, certain situations. What about the fact, right? Like let's pick someone wonderful, right? Well, if we pick someone wonderful, like the world is a better place because Linus Pauling invented the polio vaccine, and all the lives that were saved by that, right? Well, if we go back 1,000 generations and say, nope, this is wrong, abort the child, this is rape, this shouldn't happen, well then, 1,000 generations ago, Linus's great-great-great-grandparents don't exist, and neither does Linus, and neither does the polio vaccine, right? And so we're not talking about a huge sliver, but there's good in evil, Or what about the other person who has to do tremendous amount of personal growth in order to learn? They were just unconsciously going along. Somebody raped them. It nearly capsized their entire life. They can't deal with it. They start going to the self-help section. And what do we do about self-esteem? And I feel worthless and this. And they go from being an unconscious robot in a cult of materialism to deeply understanding the psyche and themselves and mastering self-esteem because they were raped. Right? The good within evil. What about lies? Right? Every time we believe a lie, we do something that we wouldn't otherwise do. Well, there are side effects, right? Our partner lied to us, so we're driving down this particular street instead of this other street. And so we don't hit a pedestrian because we're on a different street. Right? Anne Frank lies and says that she's not a Jew, so she's alive. So others are alive. So her whole lineage is alive because she told a lie. Right? Werner Herzog tells a lie in one of his documentaries and gets to do a whole video on South American dictatorship because he lied. Because he said he had a presidential document. Right? Right. So, journalists lie all the time. Pretend this is fine, pretend that is fine. Journalists pretend they're friends of a criminal. Right? Intelligence agencies lie all the time. To get this right, they send out false codes, etc., so the other side doesn't know that they've cracked their code, etc., etc. So there's all kinds of benefits that come from lying. In countries where homosexuals are killed for being homosexual, they can actually be with the love of their life and not die by lying, right? So something good is connected to something evil. What about murder, right? Well, let's start with the classic thing. If you could go back and kill Adolf Hitler, right? Just kill him in his bed just as he's rising to power, and the whole world doesn't have to go to war, right? Some good come out of that? One person dead, however many. Or what about doing experiments on animals that kill 100 monkeys and save 10 million lives? We're not saying there isn't evil. We're saying there's some good if you value any of those 10 million humans, and maybe there's a few in there that you like. No, that one should have gone, that one should have gone, but that person, I like them. So it's good they're alive, right? And revenge. Well, to take really good revenge, you often have to learn a lot, right? What would hurt them the most? You have to bother understanding them. You have to develop skills, develop a plot. You have to become more competent in many cases, right? And sometimes what happens as you set out to take revenge, that's going to take multiple years, and you get this, you do this whole undercover operation. Sometimes what happens is by the time you come to commit your act of revenge, all the growth that you've gone through to be good at revenge becomes more interesting in you. Right? Maybe you get a job to take revenge, and then you fall in love with this other person, you realize if you take revenge, they'll get implicated, and so you just live happily ever after with that person, right? What about cruelty? We can look at capitalism, for example. Bullying, megalomaniac companies, suing, dominating, right? One of the consequences of sociopathic cruelty is you have to get smart and you have to get competent. Another dynamic is killing off stupidity, right? So when a lion hunts a pack of zebra, the healthy zebra, the competent zebras, escape the lion and run away. The sick, the elderly, the ditzy zebra, right? Off looking at the sun, the other zebras run off, say, there's a lion, run. Say, oh, it was such a nice day, and then they die, right? Well, that ditziness, that deformity, that slowness, is taken out of the gene pool. And what remain are fast zebras that get faster and faster, more and more competent. And it's always the slowest, the dumbest of the pack that get knocked out. In capitalism, it's the same dynamic. Naive, incompetent, slow fools get knocked out of business constantly. Put in all their money, they trust the wrong people, and they are wiped out. Well, what remains? Highly competent, highly aware, highly driven, highly disciplined business owners that can weather the sociopathic behavior of their competitors. Now, what does that mean? It means that people who do business with those people are doing business with highly competent, fast, responsive, sophisticated people who can often build better products, right? So it also means that you get off your butt, right? Competition, meaning you see this again and again, monopoly companies that provide bad customer service, crappy products, etc. Why? Because they're a monopoly. Oh, we can't do a better car, we can't do this, we can't do that, right? Oh, why bother, right? Can't be done, can't be done. Then a competitor comes along and blows you out of the water. They provide a better car at a lower price with better service, and you either get knocked out of the corporate, right, ecology through your arrogance and stupidity, or you work your ass off to effectively compete with your challenger, your enemy. Now, what's the good that comes from that? The client, the customer, actually gets two decent cars to choose from, rather than one state-sponsored, bullshitty, 50-year-old piece of crap they have to bribe someone to get because the state agency is so corrupt they can't even produce a proper amount, and they don't care because you can't get a car anywhere else, right? So that competitive, ruthless, I'm going to get him, means something good comes for the consumer, right? So competition, that cutthroat thing, I'm going to kill you, no, I'm going to kill you. The consumer is benefited from that. You also have the fact that pain and cruelty that gives pain tends to lead to deep understanding. Going along, everything's fine, right? Then something makes you feel worse than you've ever felt before. And you start thinking, why? What's going on? Why do I feel this? You start learning, you start growing. Right? Cruelty, the dissemination of pain. Pain leads to heightened awareness. Heightened awareness leads to heightened growth and accelerated motivation to do something to stop the pain. So a burst of pain often results in a burst of growth that results in a burst of joy, right? So pain, motivation to not feel the pain, high motivation to grow with high levels of pain, leads to high levels of action and change, high levels of success, and high levels of joy. Right? So it's a cycle, right? And this is why it's only simple cults that break the one down into two and pretend they have nothing to do with each other and pretend that we should just get rid of all the evil and only have the good without understanding the cycle, right? That good leads to evil, and evil leads to good, and good leads to evil, and evil leads to good, and that one cannot exist without the other, right? You don't have half of a planet, by the way. If you cut the Earth in half, they don't just stay there. The molten core goes in, the oceans you get a complete chaos in the ecology. In other words, it's a complete illusion that they are separate from one another. And this is distinct from right and wrong for a given person at a given point in their journey, right? If we're moving towards beauty, truth, and goodness, if we're moving towards evolution and we exhale, it is wrong to exhale at that point. There's nothing left. And it is right, it is good to inhale it at that point. Because then the cycle of mental development, emotional development, physical development continues. It is right to honor that cycle. That's the right thing to do for that person at that point. But that's a personal guidance system of right and wrong. It is not right or good that everyone always exhale. It's not good to exhale and bad to inhale. No, it's about a cycle. And every person is in a different relationship to various cycles at different points in their lives. Thanks for watching.